conservative-dominated Supreme Court appears ready to make it much easier for President Trump and Republicans to keep their grip on power in Washington in maintaining control of the House. So you, of course, have been following what's been going on with redistricting in Texas, the reaction to that in blue states like California. Well, today, the court is reconsidering a central pillar of the Voting Rights Act. That is, of course, the landmark civil rights era law that was aimed at protecting the vote of every American, regardless of skin color. The issue, Louisiana's new congressional map. A group of non-black voters say that the state racially discriminated when it created a second black majority district. In oral arguments today, the court's conservative majority seemed to indicate they're inclined to agree.
This court cases in a variety of contexts have said that race-based remedies are permissible for a period of time, sometimes for a long period of time, decades in some cases, but that they should not be indefinite and should have an endpoint. And what exactly do you think the endpoint should be, or how would we know for the intentional use of race to create districts?
So the court may soon effectively forbid states from considering race when they draw their congressional district maps. And that would allow Republican-controlled legislatures across the country to potentially eliminate majority-minority districts, many of which currently held by Democrats. This is, of course, just one piece of the battle in this nationwide war for control of the House. Republicans hold the chamber by an incredibly slim margin, just 5 seats. Every district matters, and that helps explain why former President Barack Obama out with this new ad supporting California Governor Gavin Newsom's redistricting plan. In less than 3 weeks, Californians will vote on whether to temporarily adopt a new map that is likely to give Democrats 5 more representatives in Congress.
California, the whole nation is counting on you. Democracy is on the ballot November 4th. Republicans want to steal enough seats in Congress to rig the next election and wield unchecked power for 2 more years. With Prop 50, you can stop Republicans in their tracks.
All right, let's get off the sidelines and head into the arena. Our panel is here, along with someone who was inside court during those arguments. That is CNN Chief Supreme Court Analyst Joan Biskupic. Joan, let me start with you. What did you get the sense that, I realize this can be misleading sometimes. We can listen to the justices. You think they're going to decide one way, they go the other way. But what were your takeaways from today?
Okay, good to see you. And it was an intense 2.5 hours of arguments. And, you know, this is the greatest challenge to the Voting Rights Act that we've had up here in a decade. And one of the key questions is whether they will end race-based redistricting as a remedy to voting districts for Congress or for state legislatures that have been drawn to really minimize the electoral power of blacks and Hispanics. You know about that phrase, Casey, of packing and cracking. What Louisiana was found to have done in this case that started this whole thing is to have packed blacks into a single district and then spread them out, cracked them among others, so that even though the state has a 1/3 black population, they ended up with just 1 black majority district, and it was lower court judges had found likely violated the Voting Rights Act and required the state to draw a second black majority district. And that's what's at issue here, is whether this was an unconstitutional racial gerrymander. Now, let me just tell you about where I think the justices are going. The most serious ruling here, Casey, would be if they said that states would no longer be required to have race-based redistricting to remedy these districts. It's not, to start out, it's to remedy a discriminatory district. But they have a couple different off-ramps. And I have to say, just listening intensely to Justice Kavanaugh, who was a swing vote 2 years ago in a similar Alabama case, this one's from Louisiana, and listening to the Chief Justice John Roberts, who has really been the leader on racial remedies, that I think they might take a bit of an off-ramp in a way that could still undercut the Voting Rights Act, but not completely dismantle it as this case was teed up to. Because you played that great soundbite from Justice Kavanaugh at the top asking about durational limits. You know, shouldn't race-based redistricting end in the same way that, college affirmative action has had to end, as race-based school integration plans have had to end? And what the lawyer at the lectern representing the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, Janae Nelson, said was, this is a whole different kind of law. This is only to remedy situations where we've already shown that there's discrimination. And that she tried to draw a line for why this case was different. And I have to say, Casey, the liberal justices picked up on that and also seem to be trying to make their case to Justice Kavanaugh. They will vote in their private conference on Friday, and we will know some months from now where they end up ruling.
All right, Joan Biskupic getting us started. Joan, thank you very much for that. And our panel is here in the arena. Professor of Constitutional Law and Global Health Policy at Georgetown University, Michelle Goodwin. Staff writer at The Atlantic, Tolu Olorunnipa. CNN special correspondent Jamie Gangel. Former Democratic Congressman from New York, Max Rose. And Republican strategist Brad Todd. On the left side of the screen, as though this crowd was not enough, you will see our arena text chain sharing additional analysis. I want to thank them for being there. Please enjoy while we continue our conversation. And Michelle, I want to start with you just in terms of the stakes here. And, Joan did a really nice job of kind of explaining this, but the level of challenge here to the Voting Rights Act and the potential implications across the country are really significant. What would you underscore?
Well, I'd underscore something that we've actually not heard, and Joan is brilliant, and that is the 15th Amendment. So this is not just about the Voting Rights Act itself, but this is actually part of the 3 Reconstruction Amendments: the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery, 14th Amendment birthright citizenship, equal protection under law, and then critically, the 15th Amendment protecting and advancing the right to vote, of which not only African Americans had been disenfranchised, but women, poor white men. And so when we see this challenge today, it is truly about something absolutely fundamental to the Constitution, which is suffrage, the ability for individuals to vote and then elect people who would represent their interest. And that's critically important when you then think about the Voting Rights Act itself, given the broad myriad spectrum of laws that disenfranchised African Americans in housing, in education, in employment, even in recreation, and the ability to be able to go to a park and swim in a pool. Imagine if you were a voter and you're paying taxes, you might wish for your child to be able to go into the local park and swim in the pool. And if you could elect the lawmakers that would understand your child too deserves the ability to be able to swim in the pool in the summer, play checkers and play chess, and not be subject to police surveillance and arrest for doing so. You would want to elect those lawmakers that would see your interest in that.
Yeah. Tolu, let's talk about the politics of this here for a second, because obviously the assumption often baked into this is that majority minority districts elect Democrats. Is that assumption, does that still hold in today's politics?
It holds broadly, but not exclusively. There are specific instances in South Texas where majority districts voted overwhelmingly for President Trump. Big Hispanic populations voted in favor of Republicans. So that is changing, but what is not changing is the fact that state lawmakers are going to discriminate based on race one way or the other. They're either going to do so in a way that makes it harder for minorities to elect their own choice of a representative, or that makes it easier because the courts have required that through the Voting Rights Act for them to make it easier for them to elect their own representative. So the court may decide to break apart the Voting Rights Act one way or the other. These lawmakers, as we are seeing across the country, as they're trying to seize power in redistricting mid-decade, it's very clear that they're going to try to seize this power one way or the other. And if the courts allow them to do that more, there's going to be more actions that would potentially discriminate against minorities in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, big picture, Jamie, this is a part of a much bigger picture that we were trying to get at the top.
No question. There are exceptions like Texas. But I spoke to Democrats on the Hill today. They see this as an existential threat, not just for the midterm elections coming up, but going forward. From their perspective, there is no question that if this case even erodes, forget about guts, as we could see, it would be enough for Republicans to get many more seats in the midterm elections. And from a political perspective, they say, as one said, Donald Trump may be a lame duck, but he's a very powerful lame duck.
Well, first off, Democrats, I think we need to note here that they're for minority representation in minority majority districts until they're not. The Texas redistricting, which Democrats have opposed vociferously, would create 3 new Hispanic majority districts, and Democrats definitely do not want that to happen because they don't think they are doing well with Hispanics at the polls.
You're talking about the Austin area there, right?
There's one in Austin. There's also another one in Houston. The Democrats, there are 3 of the 4 new districts proposed are majority Hispanics. This is about Democrats trying to hold on to power. Originally, when we dealt with majority-minority districts 40 years ago, the goal was to drive seats that were majority-minority. Now Democrats say spread the minority vote out so that they elect as many Democrats as possible. That's what the goal here is pure partisan politics.